Brockenock sat next to the fire, angrily chewing on a leg of some unfortunate animal that the hunters had brought back with their kills that evening. The ogre chieftain stared into the flames as they licked their way across the logs inside the loose ring of rocks. This campaign to take this blasted city was becoming too costly. Several of his warriors had been wounded, and his host was only now arriving. He'd hoped that things would have worked better, and that his forces would have been more clearly entrenched in the city. He glanced around the wooden palisades that made up their makeshift fortress. They had won this position and held it off from the dwarves and other contenders for this spot. It had been earned, and Brockenock was rather proud of that. The bulk of his army was still about a day's march away, but his scouts had confirmed that his enemy's forces were all in similar situations. There would be no avoiding the big battle that lay ahead, and Brockenock had no desire to do so in any case. He just wished that the odds weren't so even. As he stared into the fire, he began to notice what looked like small faces staring out at him. The tongues of flame flickered and spat, causing the visions to jump erratically around his eyes, to the point where he wasn't sure of what he was seeing. He shook his head to clear it, and when he opened his eyes again, he saw a horned face staring out at him from the fire. Great, jagged teeth framed a cruel smile that hung open, allowing a cloven tongue to weave in between the sharp fragments of a twisted mouth. "Bow before me, you worm!" the demonic visage roared. Brockenock hadn't moved, and his face showed no reaction except for now as his eyebrows rose to a point. "What did you call me?" he growled. This caused the face in the flames to sneer. "I said that you should fall to your knees and worship me." The ogre rose to his feet and picked up one of his giant blades that lay beside him. He stepped closer to the flame, his face unflinching as it drew nearer to the blistering heat. "No," he replied. The fire snorted and a blast of heat dissipated. In the ensuing darkness, Brockenock could barely make out the muscular form of some armor-clad warrior before him. Glowing strips of embers seemed to wrap themselves around the demon's exposed skin, and bright red eyes stared balefully up at him. "We don't have time for this drawn-out theatrics." The demon's voice was a scratch now, and he seemed impatient. "Our enemy is advancing on us, and we have work that must be done." "How do I know that you are not one of my enemies?" Brockenock did not lower his weapon. "You don't, but I have a proposition for you that will benefit us both." The demon paused, gauging the ogre's reaction. The stony face was as impassible as ever. "I'm listening," Brockenock said at length. "You are seeking glory and riches, are you not?" "Of course," Brockenock responded. "I can give these to you, no questions asked. Ally with me, and we will take this city together. You can have all the gold and weapons that you find in the city. For all I care, you can have the city itself, but with one small concession to me." The demon smiled. Its teeth were living coals that sizzled in the night. "And what might that be?" the ogre asked. "Scattered throughout the city are strange, glowing pillars made of crystal and stone that are of particular interest to me. I want them. You can have everything else but those." "What are they for?" Brockenock slowly lowered his weapon. "That is not your concern," the demon snapped. "All that should matter to you is that should we win the battle, you and your tribe will be richer than you could have possibly ever imagined. Your legacy will be secured as the greatest chieftain your people have ever known." There was a long, drawn-out pause. The only sounds were those of the night, an owl hooting in the distance, a wolf howling in the moon, crickets chirping their repetitive song. After this long pause, Brockenock held out a meaty hand. "What's your name, demon, so that I can tell to whom I sell my services?" The demon smiled and grasped the outstretched hands. "I am Bierlat," he said. Brockenock didn't even grimace as the demon's flesh burned into his palm. The hardened stone of the abandoned keep was cold. The first rays of summer's sun had yet to really warm the old building, and fresh waves of cold air off the coast seemed intent on keeping it this way. Valen stood in the tallest tower overlooking the dead city before him. On the table behind him lay 2 letters. The first was from one of his scouts. The elf had died from his wounds soon after reaching the captured fortress that Valen had claimed as their base. The other was from a much more surprising source. In the far distance, across the vast stretch of the quiet city, Valen could just make out the distant fires of the enemy camp, their number beyond counting. This caused the weight that the elf felt on his shoulders seem to grow heavier. His scouts' report had only confirmed what he had already suspected. The ogres and demons had joined camps and were preparing to sweep down through the city streets, killing as they went. Valen could feel the promised violence in the air. He had prepared himself for death long before coming to Valinstradt. And while the fear of the unknown land that followed this life was still something that haunted him, as it did all who approached the end of their time, he was prepared to do what he could, at the very least, to inconvenience the combined might of the coming enemy. Valen sighed. His commander here in the city had done an excellent job of preparing the way for their forces descending from the north. Karnan had found an excellent fortress and had held it from all who would have laid claim to it. Not only that, but he had discovered so much about the city, and had recovered many priceless artifacts and a surprising amount of supplies that would definitely help in the coming battle, but alone would not have been enough. It was the second letter which gave Valen hope. It bore the symbol of a stag on its seal, the symbol of the dwarven priest Thrag. Even with the dwarf's stoicism and haughty language, it was hard to keep the desperate edge out of his words. There came a knock at the door, and Valen had to bid the servant to enter. A stocky human pushed the door open and stood in the cold light of the early spring night. "My lord," he said in a gruff tongue, "the dwarf emissary is still waiting for your response." Yes, Valen waved his hand. "Tell the dwarf that I will be down shortly, and that I will have his response written out along with my conditions for our cooperation." The human nodded and exited quickly, shutting the door behind him. Valen turned and sat down at the desk, dipping his quill into the inkwell he had prepared to write. Meanwhile, somewhere deep beneath the streets of Valinstradt, something finally woke. It had felt the tittering footsteps of mortals far above it, but that had not been enough to wake it from its slumber. Something was different. Something had changed. Someone had touched the Power Stones, bringing them to life. Why they were back here in this realm was something that nagged at the back of this essence's mind, but it was a minor thing that was not as important as why there were creatures trying to pull on its power through the stones. The entity existed beyond physical constraints, but it was now awake, and as it felt the tramping feet of armored boots far above it in numbers that seemed limitless even to its unfathomable awareness, it smiled with mouthless lips. It began to rise. The time for its arrival had come. Alright everybody, the time has finally come. We are here for the culmination of the battle for Valinstradt. We have fought our skirmishes, we've developed our heroes, and now it's time to prepare for the big battle. So, to give you a quick rundown of what we're going to be doing, every faction has 7,500 points to spend right from the get-go. You divide that up among as many commanders as you want. The only rule with this, beyond, basic Clash of Kings 2019 rules sets, as in you need hordes and regiments and all that kind of stuff, the only rule is, if you bring it, it has to be painted and based. Okay, so I'm going to repeat that again. It has to be painted and based. If you bring it, and it is not both of those things, it will be taken off the table. This is an exhibition battle. We want it to be the coolest of the cool and the best of the best, okay? So we want people to come over and ogle at the massiveness that is the battle. Final standings places the elves way ahead of everybody else. Dave has had a lot of battles and he's won a lot of skirmishes, so he's done a good job and he has probably secured, I think he's got about 1,500 extra points. So remember, every gold piece, so every campaign gold that you have converts into 10 points for Kings of War battles. So if you have 15 gold from Vanguard, then you have 150 gold or points to spend on your army above and beyond that 7,500 points. Okay, so that means with Dave's 1,500 points, he's closer to 9,000 points that he will be bringing for the Northern Alliance. Behind him, I believe the ogres are next in line. I'm not sure exactly how many points I have exactly, but it's closer to 100 or so. After them, I believe, are the Dwarven Alliance, the Imperial Dwarves. And then in last place, unfortunately right now, unless Tyrell has something that I do not know of, in last place is coming the demons and their undead allies. So, we have the big battle coming this Saturday. I'll be showing up as close to 5 as possible. I'm going to set up the terrain, get everything ready to go, and all that kind of stuff. The way things are going to work as far as setup goes, remember, this is just for fun, and it's meant to be as cinematic as possible. So we're going to be deploying as fast as we can so that we can start the battle no later, as in we start the first player turn at 6 o'clock. Okay? And we go through this. This is just for bragging rights. There will be no prizes for who wins the campaign necessarily. Okay? However, there will probably be a write-up behind this, and we'll probably finish off the story to let all of the viewers out there who watch these as to who won the campaign and how the final battle turns out. So you just heard the fluff update for that. Go ahead and listen back through it again if you'd like. Please bring your armies and be ready to go as close to 5 as you can. I would like to start the battle by 6 again, like I was saying. If we start a little bit after that, that's fine, but I would love to try and get this started at 6 or before. Let me know if you plan on coming and what you plan on coming and for which faction you plan on bringing models. As it stands, I probably have enough for pretty much all of the ogres and the demons, as well as their 2 castles, I believe. The elves also have a castle. So we have all of that all set up. We have plenty of terrain. We'll have 3 tables at Game Pulse set up specifically for this battle. Okay, bring the best that you got. I have created a graphic for you to help you convert your leaders. You are only converting the leaders of your warbands into a hero for the battle. Now, this graphic needs to be tweaked if it was going to be balanced. This is not necessarily a balanced game, as has been pointed out. It should be, there should be a shot for everybody to win, but for the most part, we wanted your hero to have a cinematic feel. We wanted him to be an Aragorn or a Legolas or a Gimli or something along those lines instead of just, hero number 2 on the battlefield. So I'm going to go ahead and throw this up right now. Here's the graphic. As you can see, basically with you just convert any of the regular stats, so like speed, melee, ranged, and such. You'll just convert those straight over with that first box that I have for you. If it's a D8, there's a D8 to D6 equivalent modifier there. So just go ahead and follow that. The only exception to this is when you convert your armor for your Vanguard character over to their defense stat, flip the D8 to D6 equivalent. So if they have an armor of 2+, that's going to be a 6+ defense. If they have a 3 to 4+, that's going to be a 5+ defense stat, and so on and so forth, if that makes sense. If you have any questions about this, feel free to get a hold of me. Okay, nerve is going to be calculated a little bit differently. You take your wound stats, so however many wounds your character is, that determines their base nerve. So if they have 2 wounds, they have a base nerve of 10-12. Then you add a bonus for how good of a stat they have in nerve for their character. So if a character has 2 wounds and a nerve of 5+, they will have a base 10-12, and then you will add 4 onto it, as it is in that second box. So their final nerve, if they have 2 wounds and a nerve of 5+ in Vanguard, will be a 14-16 nerve. Okay, so again, if you have any questions in this, please do not hesitate to contact me. Beyond that, the amount of dice they have for their attacks, you will triple that. So if somebody has 2 attacks, so they roll 2d8 for their attacks in Vanguard, they will then have 6 attacks in Kings of War. Beyond that, we have a list of special rules that you can change over from Vanguard to Kings of War. So like if they have Defender, that counts as Big Shield. Scout counts as Vanguard. Sneaky is +1 to hit individuals, and so on and so forth. In addition to those things, so whatever your character has, all models on infantry or cavalry bases are granted the individual special rule, and all models with the large infantry or large cavalry bases are granted the nimble special rule. And all characters are granted the very inspiring and living legend special rules, meaning that they inspire everybody, including allies. Okay? If you have any questions about those, or if you see a special rule that you don't have on there, go ahead and contact me. If it has a correspondent, like Crushing Strength 1 is Crushing Strength 1, right? If it's Crushing Strength 1 in Vanguard, it's Crushing Strength 1 in Kings of War, and so on and so forth. If it has a direct parallel, just give them that. Beyond that, yeah. So that's how you convert your character over. There are going to be different objectives for this, okay? First off, there are 3 castles in play. The ogres and the demons both have their own castle, so that's kind of nice. The Northern Alliance also has their own castle for this one. We're going to be using the siege rules as explained in Clash of Kings 2019. Basically, the way that it's going to work for all of this is there are going to be 3 different kinds of objectives. One is going to be a kill scenario. Players or sides will receive 1 victory point for every 500 points of the enemy they have routed. Okay, so that should put you in the 30 to 35 points that you can gain strictly from that. Beyond that, there are going to be 8 power stones spread out across the 3 tables. Okay, you will be able to claim one of those for 2 victory points each. Okay, so that is a potential 16 more right there. Then on top of that, the 3 castles, they're going to be a little bit different. Basically, you're going to control them by how much unit strength you have in the courtyard of each of these castles, and each castle, whoever controls it by having the most unit strength in the courtyard or in the towers and walls surrounding the courtyard, garrisoning them, whoever has the most unit strength there will control it, and each castle is worth 7 victory points. Okay, so that's a quick breakdown for you of how you could win this battle. Okay, so it's a combination of kill, loot, and siege. Or sorry, kill, pillage, and siege, because the power stones are going to be objectives, not loot tokens. That's basically what I have. I'm going to try and rig this up so that I can stream this event in bursts. I'm not going to try and make everybody watch all what I imagine is going to be about 6 hours of coverage of this battle. However, I am going to try and at least record something and put it up so everybody can see what the battle is and give a quick report along with the fluff update after the fact. Okay. That is about all I have for this time. We had a lot of stuff to go over. If you have any questions, refer to the Game Pulse page, or give me a call, or message me, or something like that if you have any questions. I am more than happy to answer anything about this. Okay. Even if you haven't played in the campaign up to this point, if you have some painted models that you would like to see on the battlefield, please, by all means, contact me. We'll get you set in there so that you can help command this battle, because we are going to need sergeants and lieutenants and captains and whatnot to help run this big of a battle, because we are probably looking at about an 18,000 points per side battle. It's going to be intense. This is going to be really cool, and I hope you guys are all looking forward to it as much as I am. Once again, guys, thanks for doing this campaign with me. I know I didn't get out the quite the amount of updates that I wanted to with this, but life kind of gets in the way in that regard. However, that's the way things work. I'm still really happy with how the battles have turned out and how the campaign has turned out, and I hope everybody has had fun, and I'm hoping that this will be a great capstone to what has otherwise been a great event as well. Thank you guys, and good gaming. I'll look forward to rolling dice with you this Saturday.